our third webinar series on the science of soul. Okay. And most importantly, our honorable speaker with us today, Dr. Khairil, for willing to share with us his knowledge and wisdom. Unfortunately, Dr. Jusmawati is unable to be with us here because she's not feeling well. So let us make some dua for her. Inshallah that Allah will help her. And now, I believe maybe there's a few words that want to be given by Dr. Hafizah as the head of IQWAP.
Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi everyone. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Khairil Hussaini for being ready to share his input with us today. And then also, I would like just to share with all of you, this series of Soul is part of the departmental program. And we plan to, and we usually invite speakers and experts to share their expertise and knowledge with us. So we really would like to encourage, so we are having like a monthly session. So next month, we will still having this session on 12th of May. So I hope we can again join the session after this one, and then I hope we can also share our input as well during the session, as well as like take part in asking questions after the session. Okay, so I think that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hafizah. Okay, so this session, there will be two sessions for this program. The first session is talk given by Dr. Khairil, and then we will have a question and session answer after the talk. And I believe most of us here are familiar with Dr. Khairil since we actually have invited him before to share with us about the framework regarding spirituality, the soul, and this is just a refresh of information about Dr. Khairil. His full name is Dr. Khairil Hussaini bin Jamil, an assistant professor of Islamic scriptural science, tafsir and hadith at the Department of Quran and Sunnah. He is also a member of the Islamic Studies Association in the United Kingdom and an expert consultant to the Malaysian government. As for our topic today, it is the concept of Nasihah as the philosophy of Islamic spiritual care. Dr. Khairil?
Yeah.
Are you there? Okay. Are you ready?
Okay.
All right. I will now pass the floor to Dr. Khairil. Thank you.
Okay. Bismillah walhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man istanna bi sunnatihi wa ihtada bi hudahu wa ba'd. First of all, I thank the organizer, the Department of Psychology, especially the head of the department, Dr. Jusmawati, and also the committee that is responsible for organizing this session for this afternoon, and especially Dr. Hafizah. We meet again. I'm very happy. Thank you for this opportunity to meet and also to exchange ideas and to spark a discussion. Perhaps we will have a better idea or better understanding of the subject in the future. No, because this is a Zoom session in the afternoon of Friday. If it is in a classroom, then we can have a bit of like activities so that we can make it a more, how do we call it, an energetic session, a lively session. But we resort to Zoom, so I will try my best to make it simple and to ensure that we will grasp the concepts and also how we can somehow think of the operational framework for implementing the concepts. First of all, I would like to rectify with regard to the title because I have given the new title, and
Oh,
also I think in the poster it has been changed as well. So I'll be speaking today on riayah and nasiha for spirituality and spiritual care. Okay. Okay, let me try because just before this, before the session, a few minutes before the session, the PowerPoint crashed. So let me try if I can share this. Hopefully there's nothing. Okay. Now you can see my PowerPoint. If I do the full screen mode, can you see the full screen mode?
yes.
Okay. Okay. And what about my voice? Is it okay? Is it at this level?
At my side, your voice is very clear.
Very clear. Okay.
Mm.
No, it's not a sleepy voice, right? Okay.
Inshallah.
No, let's begin. Okay, riayah and nasiha for spirituality and spiritual care. Here we have two concepts. Both of them I chose the Arabic terms because it's a bit difficult and challenging for me at the moment to find an equivalent in English or even in Malay to translate these two concepts. So while I'm still developing the explanation and the elaboration of these two concepts, so I think it is better for me to stick first with the Arabic terms. Perhaps in the future, maybe I can find the equivalence of these terms in English, or at least something that can be utilized to convey some of the meanings of these terms. Okay, so we have two Arabic terms, and we have another two terms which are spirituality and spiritual care, and we will see why we differentiate between spirituality and spiritual care in this presentation. Now, I have divided this presentation into 7 sections. So we'll begin, or we'll start one by one, and we'll discuss it one by one. And perhaps by the end of each section, we can have a bit of activity, maybe a question or something, or quiz or something. Okay, so first we will begin with Science of Soul because of the what do you call it, the title, or when this program is known as I think webinars on a webinar on Science of Soul, something like that. So now we will be speaking on what is science and what is soul. Okay, so in the first section will concern the terms and concepts related to this phrase that or this term that we have in front of us. First of all, we all know with regard to science, there are disputes concerning how do we define or how do we understand what is science. So here the title I put it here, the problem of science and approaches to Islamization of science or human knowledge, as we all say today, Islamization of human knowledge. With regard to science, we know that some equates science with knowledge, seeing that it is taken from the Latin scire, to know, and originally perhaps coming from the Greek Greek root, and we can compare another word very close to the sound scire, that is schizo, and maybe in psychology you can recall schizophrenia. Okay, so schizo is to separate, to distinguish, or in other words, the splitting of the minds. So here science is taken as a synonym of knowledge, regardless of the modern interpretation of knowledge, or the modern understanding, or even the postmodern understanding of knowledge, or division of knowledge, or whatever discussion or philosophical take on how do we understand knowledge. Now, simply we can say that science is knowledge here, but science also has been considered or regarded or taken as techne, practical methods, in contrast to, or we can also say techne versus episteme. Okay, so practical methods in contrast to theoretical truth. So here, science would always be defined as something practical, measurable, something like that, compared to those theoretical subjects or even philosophical discussion. So here it's a bit different, or distinct from the first position that takes science as knowledge in general, or equates science with knowledge. Here there is a sort of bifurcation or division where science is reduced to practical subjects. And in relation to that, there is a position that views science as quantitative measures. They embrace the quantitative ethos, and everything should be as possible as can. We have to connect it or base it on any quantitative items, okay, something like that, or measures, or ideas, or tools or something. So it must be quantitative, and there is a position to say that science is actually a social construct. Science comes from the social construction, because there is no knowledge except that there is an ideology behind it, and the society is the one that forms this ideology, or embrace this ideology, adopts this ideology. So it's a bit of a sociological view of science, and we have many more views on defining science. So now, when we speak of science of soul, what do we mean by science here? Are we trying to say, is it a knowledge of soul, a knowledge about soul, or are we speaking of any practical scheme or practical devices that we can apply in term or in relation to the subject of soul? Or are we trying to quantify anything related to soul? So we have to answer these questions because we are using the term now, the science of soul. So we have to be very clear so as not to confuse the readers. Particularly, we have readers or audience of different backgrounds. And with regard to quantity, because this is what we can say science for some, or for many, science has been reduced to quantitative, or the quantity, the idea of quantity. And I think it's best to read this book by I don't know how to say his name, Renin Quenon, The Reign of Quantity and the Science of the Times, in which you can see the quote here: "A new confusion makes its appearance. Modern physicists, in their efforts to reduce quality to quantity, have arrived by a sort of logic of error to the point of confusing the two, and thence to the attribution of quality itself to their matter as such, and they end by assigning all reality to matter, or at least all that they are capable of recognizing as reality, and it is this that constitutes materialism, properly so called." So we have to be very clear when we speak of science. Do we adopt this paradigm and trying to materialize soul, or what? Okay, so that is a question. Now we come to another part, that is Islam in science, the Islamization of science. Regardless of whatever a definition of science that we intended from our speech today, there have been an extensive discourse on Islamization of knowledge, and included in knowledge, if we take science as knowledge, included in knowledge is science. So maybe we can look at how all those approaches to Islam and science, and these are what I list here are the what they call it, the famous approaches although we have many more perhaps, and these some of these are taken from an article by Shahrir Muhammad Zain, Professor Shahrir. Okay, so you can see first Bukhailism attributed to Maurice Bucaille, who wrote, I think, the Quran, the Bible, and Science, something like that, the title of his work. But the approach is to come to a certain ayah, a particular ayat or hadith, and to look at the conformity between that ayah, that particular verse, and that particular hadith with any of the current scientific discovery. So when you look at perhaps an ayah on wal jibal autada, the mountains aspects, so you go to what the science of the study of mountains, what it is called, I think it's seismology. I think you look at seismology and try to, I'm sorry if I mistaken the term, I think it's seismology, and look at, okay, it is true that there is a sort of mountain being similar to a peg or a nail, something like that. Okay, so that is the approach. You come to a text, you come to a scripture, to a verse of the Quran or hadith, and look for the conformity and interpret the word in that ayat or in the hadith to make it in accordance to the current scientific discovery, or to say that the current scientific discovery has already been approved by the Quran and the hadith. In a way, it is also, this approach is also known as the scientific foreknowledge. The foreknowledge, I mean, knowledge ahead of time, the scientific foreknowledge in the Quran and Sunnah, or sometimes the scientific miracles in the Quran and the Sunnah. Okay? And many other names that we can bring, although Maurice Bucaille himself, it is not clear whether he is a Muslim or not, but as far as his own words, he has never declared himself as a Muslim. But there are many, I think perhaps we can take it as gossips, or circulated in the social media on his conversion to Islam. Many other names such as Abdul Majid Al-Zindani, Zaghlul Al-Najjar, they all work on the same premise, I mean, similar approach of Bukhailism. Okay. The other approach is the approach of Sayyid Naqir Al-Attas, or we call it the Attasian Ghazalian reconstructive approach, that in order to Islamize, one have to reconstruct oneself, and to first understand the worldview of Islam. So it has to begin from the internal of the person, okay? And he has to perhaps first understand the worldview, then he will be able to operate based on that worldview. But when we speak of this worldview, most of the concepts being elaborated by this Attasian Ghazalian approach, most of these concepts have been tied or what do you call it, enclosed with the Sufi idea of or the Sufi interpretation. Okay, so like the concept of adab, the concept of what else? In the concept of insan. Yeah, so you have to understand Sufism in order to really get what is being or to really get into the deep of what is being explained in this approach. So you have a sort of not really into Sufism, the Faruqian integrative scheme, more towards the operational part. So, okay, you go to the modern sciences, try to integrate it with Islamic perspective, okay, try to include Islamic perspective in a certain element or certain topics of the modern sciences, or whatever that there is that are already available. So we try to integrate between the two sides. Okay? And there's the approach of Waqar Ahmad, Sayyid Waqar Ahmad Hussaini. Prof Shahrir call it Hussainism. I'm not sure. I mean, it's very close to my name. I Zionism. I'm not sure, but we will not go to the elaboration of each of these approaches, but just to mention here, there are many approaches to the question of science and Islam, or Islam and science, the nexus between Islam and science, and modes of operation. How do we operate? And also, you can see here the Ijmali school of thought. Perhaps one needs to read further works of Ziauddin Sardar to really get, because there's no like a clear explanation of the methodology of the Ijmalis school of thought attributed to Ziauddin Sardar, and many others. I haven't read read this book by Professor Abdul Rashid Moten, titled "Varieties of Islamization." Maybe we can find more elaborations on this subject, Islam in science, and how to Islamize science, or what do we do. But at the moment as well, I have a supervisee working on a PhD on Islam and science, particularly science and the interpretation of hadith. So she is working on all these approaches, trying to figure out how can we simplify and make it understandable, so that even if we can't go deeply into each of them, we can have an idea of what are the differences between these approaches, and which one is more suitable for us, or for any particular state or level. Okay, so we will need a better study on all these different and diverse approaches into Islam and science. Okay. So that is my introduction on the subject. Now we come to the question here. When we say the science of soul, are we speaking on the science of ruh? Yeah, because the translation usually it is translated as soul, the word ruh, or sometimes spirit, and there are differences between Muslim scholars. Some would say that nafs and ruh are synonyms, are the same. Okay, the nafs and ruh, and some would say that they are different. And here is a chapter by Sarah Tlili, I think, Tlili, trying to say, then her chapter is trying to say that the word ruh is not necessarily, or we can say that it is not necessarily be translated as ruh or as soul. Okay, so her thesis is that since the beginning is a bit complicated, more inclined towards breath rather than soul, then because of the anthropocentric paradigm of Muslim scholars, they started to translate ruh, or to interpret ruh and reduce ruh into soul. So you can read the chapter, because I don't read the whole chapter here, but you can see here the title From Breath to Soul. This is chapter number 1 in this collection, Arabic Humanities, Islamic Thought. In honor of someone, Everett K. Rawson. Okay, so from the chapter title is From Breath to Soul, the Quranic word ruh and its interpretation or misinterpretations. And that is her, I think her, it is her. Okay, that is her conclusion at the end. She said, this essay has shown that the Mufassir's interpretation of ruh are driven more by anthropocentric factors, like the assumption that God gave ruh to the creatures whom he most favored, rather than by their ability to unlock the true meaning of an inscrutable Quranic term. Because she said in the chapter that there was an interpretation, ruh quwa, ruh quwa soul, ruh quwa qudra, okay, ruh as soul, ruh as qudra, ruh as wind, okay, ruh as as Jibril. So she said, why towards the end they have reduced ruh to soul, whereas in the beginning it is more connected to wind. Now this can lead to a larger problem, that is the existence of soul. For many of the atheists or materialists will say that the soul is a sort of fallacy. There's no proof to the existence of soul. Okay, so what is the proof in the Quran and Sunnah that speak of soul? Okay, we as Muslims, we will believe that there are souls. Okay, they are ruh. But when you say the science of ruh, this is very difficult if we take science as, you know, quantitative or as measurable. So this will be very difficult to engage with. We have many other subjects that will come into the picture. Okay? So I'm not bringing this to confuse the audience, but to say that you know, there are many other issues that will come into the picture when we use the idea or the term science of soul. Okay. Now, we come to the first term in the title, that is ri'ayah. Now we have what is known as theology of care, proposed by some of the researchers in the West, Muslim scholars in the West. Particularly the one I know is Brother Arnaud Yassin Mo. He was with me when we organized the International Conference on Islamic Spiritual Care. So he was also speaking on the theology of care. So what is this ri'ayah? First, we go to the verses of the Quran, and we find this ayat, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَعَهْدِهِمْ رَاعُونَ. And the translation, and who are shepherds, or who take care of their trust and their covenant. Trust, amana, those objects being entrusted to someone. Okay, said, I'm going somewhere, please keep this thing with you for a moment. So these are the trust that, you know, the objects that you are entrusted with. So they are physical objects, and they are there is also an abstract thing, that is the covenant between man and God, okay, and Allah. So these objects or these abstracts, okay, they are ra'un, the successful believers, as in Surah Al-Mu'minun, qad aflaha al-mu'minun. Okay, so the successful believers are the one who take care of their trust and their covenant. Or if we go for the literal translation of the word ra'un, we'll find it shepherds, the shepherds of the trust and the covenant. So the word ra'ud is a plural for ra'i. So the ra'i can be translated as the one who takes care, and or guardian, or the one who governs, and in the literal sense, the shepherd. Okay. Now we can see that the word ra'i, or the idea of shepherdhood or taking care, is there in the Quran. Okay, and it's an attribute of a successful believer. So what are the amanah as well? Okay, that we can see the ra'ud, or those who take care, will bear the responsibility and take care of the amanah. Okay, so we know in other surah, in Surah Al-Ahzab, verse 72, Inna arabna al-amanata ala as-samawati wal-ardi wal-jibal fa-abayna an yahmilnaha wa ashfaqna wa hamalaha al-insanu innahu kana zaluman jahula. We offered the trust, the amanah, to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, and they declined to bear it and feared it. And in some interpretations, they are not able to bear it, but man undertook it, or to bear it. Verily, man was innocently unjust to his weak body and ignorant of the reality of the trust. So what is this trust? Scholars differed amongst themselves on the interpretation of amanah. What is this amanah that is being offered? That the heavens and the earth and the mountains were not able to carry it. And one of the interpretations indicate that the amanah is the recognition of Allah, ma'rifatullah, and the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and only man can take care of recognition of Allah and explain to others and manifest it, and also understand or embrace the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because man are endowed with heart, and the heart can embrace, even the whole universe. But others are not endowed, not given with hearts, this qalb, so they are not able to embrace, the vastness of the love and the ma'rifah and the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So man was previously unjust to his body because he think that he can take this responsibility, and he was ignorant of the reality of this responsibility. Nevertheless, because man was innocent and he think he can do, this is a praiseworthy attribute. This is a praiseworthy attitude. But if he breach this responsibility, then it turns into a blameworthy attitude. So the ayah, innahu kana zaluman jahula, we think it is general. We may assume that it is general, that all men are zalum and jahul, and this is not possible, because included in men are the prophets. And the prophets, so we don't say that the prophets are zalum and jahul. Okay, the prophets are unjust and ignorant, because the term or the word insan here is general. It includes everyone. Okay? So in order to say that, the word zalum jahul here can be taken as praiseworthy and blameworthy at the same time. Okay? So we have to go for an extensive elaboration in order to really get this justification. Now we have seen how ri'ayah is connected to amanah. Ri'ayah, mu'min as ra'i, as shepherd, they will take care of the amanah, and included in the amanah is the ma'rifah, wisdom, the love of God. And when we read the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet mentioned, ala kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyati. Every one of you is a guardian, and every one of you is accountable for his subjects. Okay, and then he mentioned the ruler is guardian and responsible for his subjects. A man is guardian of his family, responsible. A woman is the guardian of her husband's home and is responsible of them, the children, the home. The slave man is guardian. So there are like degrees and also situations, different contexts where, each and every one of us will be ra'i, will be guardian. Or if we translate it literally, each and every one of us is a shepherd. Okay, so we are shepherd, and we are included in the ra'iyah, because somehow there is a ra'i above us. Okay, so we are included in the ra'iyah, or in the Malay we say rakyat. But at the same time, all the ra'iyahs are ra'in. Okay? So you are the master and you are the servant at the same time. Okay? So you are the ra'iyah and you are the master, meaning that we have to make everyone a master of himself, but we have to also make everyone a servant of the one. Okay? So you have to take care of both at the same time. Okay, this is a very interesting with regard to this hadith, although usually people don't speak of this aspect, but we will see that it is very important to understand ra'iyah in that sense. Now, the third or the second concept, the second term in the title is nasiha. Now, before I proceed, maybe as a sort of taking rest, so try to think of what do you think I will be speaking here? I'll be speaking of what concerning nasiha. Okay. Maybe 1 minute to think of what do you think that the speaker will speak about when it comes to the term nasiha. Is it like, Nasiha is about giving advice to others. Okay, so I'll leave you for a few seconds to think. Okay, now keep the ideas with you. Okay, so let us see what is nasiha. We find this term nasiha and its derivatives in the Quran in many places. Okay, this is a list of places in the Quran where you can find nasiha or one of its derivatives. Okay, you can see here, uballighukum risalati rabbi wa ana lakum nasihun amin. Okay, I convey to you the messages from my Lord, and I am the nasih and the truthful nasih. Okay, so nasih amin. So this is a word of messenger, the words of the messengers. So if you read Surah Al-A'raf, you find most of the messengers will call themselves nasih. Okay, we call it. So we know that in Arabic, if it is in that form, fa'il, the acuan, what do you call it? The form is fa'il. It refers to the agent or the doer. So now they call themselves as nasih. They attribute themselves with nasiha. Although we can find in a place where even shaitan call himself nasih, nasihin, but we will see that the idea of nasiha is very fundamental, and the nasiha is one of the acts or the actions of the pursuit of the prophets and those who follow in the footsteps of the prophets. In the hadith, this is a very famous hadith by on the authority of Tamim ad-Dari, that the Prophet ﷺ said, religion is nasiha, religion is nasiha, religion is nasiha. And then the people or the Sahaba asked the Prophet, to whom should it be directed, Messenger of Allah? Or in Arabic, only liman, for whom? Ya Rasulullah. And the Prophet replied to Allah, his book, his apostle, his messengers, the managers of the affairs of the believers, and all the believers, meaning the A'immah, the rulers or the leaders of the believers, and Ammah, and the common amongst the believers or the Muslims, the managers of the Muslims, and the common amongst the Muslim. Okay, so we can see here, nasiha, first it is emphasized that deen or religion is nasiha, or nasiha is religion. Okay, so if we have like religious study or a religious institution, so the core of that study or the core of that institution is nasiha. Okay, so that is the first. Second, we can see that the nasiha is for Allah and for the messenger, for the books of Allah, and for the managers of the affairs of the Muslims, and for all Muslims. Now we know that nasiha for Allah. How is nasiha for Allah? Okay, so in my paper on nasiha as the philosophy for Islamic spiritual care, you can read an interpretation, my suggestion on how to understand the phrase, the nasiha for Allah. But we can perhaps understand it better when we look at the linguistic meaning of the word nasiha. Nasiha is derived from the Arabic root nasaha, which means to merge two entities, two things, two persons, two products, and so on and so forth, and bring both to a good state. Okay, so it's like you unify between the two. A sewer or seamstress is referred to as nasih in Arabic because he or she stitches the cloth fragments together. So all the cloth fragments, she brought them together and makes them a fine cloth. Okay. So the act of integrating, the act of bringing together, the act of unifying, all of these can be expressed by the Arabic word nasiha. The term is then used to denote a mended, a transform or improve item that is free of flaws or gaps. So we say taubah nasuha, taubah nasuha, because the taubah is like a fine cloth without any gap, without any hole. So it's actually the idea of bringing together, making something fine and without any hole, without any gaps, then we call it nasuha. As also mentioned in the Quran, repentance that is sincere and honest. Similarly, nashul asal. When we say one nasahal asal, it means he filters honey to remove impurities and obtain the pure extract. So we can say that nasiha includes as well filtering, includes as well extracting, includes as well what else we say, integrating, okay, and also purifying. So all of them can be represented by the term nasiha. Okay. So my understanding of nasiha now is broader than the common understanding of nasiha, that is giving advice. But nasiha is the act of bringing something together or unifying. And that explains the call towards Allah. The messengers, they did call towards Allah. That is nasiha. So that is why they call themselves nasihun. So what we are doing when we say Islamizing, integrating, so all of these are actually the act of nasiha. Okay, bringing together or integrating or purifying or filtering or whatever that can be represented by the concept of stitching or removing impurities from honey, or so and the similar concept. Now we have somehow get the idea of what is ri'ayah and what is nasiha. Now we come to the spirituality and spiritual care. Okay. First of all, why do I differentiate between spirituality and spiritual care? Because in the current practice, in the modern time, when we look for the scientific journals and papers and studies, scholarship, we find that there is actually a distinction, or we can say to separate, not separate, but to make to put it into areas, okay? Not to really separate it, but to say that this is an area of concentration and this is another area of concentration. So you have spirituality and spirit. The concept of spirituality itself, when we try to figure out how people understand spirituality, we have various definitions of spirituality, and whether spirituality will necessarily include religiousness or not. You have some people now in our time speaking of spirituality without religion. Okay? So we have diverse or opposing as well ideas on what is spirituality. But somehow we can say spirituality is broader than spiritual care as understood in the modern setting, because spiritual care is more related to the a sort of exercise to fulfill that spirituality, but in a certain context, mostly in the setting, in the healthcare setting. So I said in hospitals, in behavioral, or what call it, the correctional center, okay, rehabs. And so here where spiritual care is perceived and is practiced. So it's a form of professionalization of delivering spirituality, in a sense, is a bit more specific than spirituality. So historically, we know that spiritual care is related to pastoral care, or sometimes it's known as chaplaincy. Okay, and most of the times they are related to the context or the conditions of crisis or illness or vulnerability. In contrast to spirituality, which does not necessarily requires a sort of crisis, because spirituality can be, when you are even in a well state, a well condition, okay, a good condition, you just want to enhance your spirituality. So that is how our modern approach to spirituality and spiritual care is framed or is formed. Okay. So when we discuss this subject between some of us, me and my colleagues and my friends in Netherlands, in the UK, so we think that it is important for us to look at this subject, because there is a rising trend on professionalizing spirituality, and to say, how do we sciencing spirituality, that in that sense, okay, try to scientification of the unseen, or all those aspects. Okay, there's a rising trend, and there are also needs for spiritual care in the society. Even in Netherlands, it's a kind of you have a legal right to spiritual care, that you can request for that right to be considered, or to be taken care. Okay, so when we discuss amongst friends from many regions, and we see that, even in America now, they have like the Khalili Center, speaking of spiritual care. Let us try to conceptualize spiritual care from the Islamic perspective. Okay. So we organized this conference in 2021, the first international conference on Islamic spiritual care. It was organized online, and as you can see from the proceedings, from the titles of the proceedings, we have diverse ideas or concepts on what is Islamic spiritual care. Okay. So you can see the idea, the notion of the theology of care, okay, and taking it from the philosophy of spirituality, then trying to compare between what we now call as Islamic spiritual care and the Christian spiritual care, whether the idea of spiritual care, chaplaincy, and pastoral care, whether these are necessarily derived or taken or borrowed from Christians, or do we have like the original ideas in the history or in the classical Islam? Okay. And a different approach to spiritual care when we consider different regional studies of spiritual care. So you can even study spiritual care in relation to local wisdom, and have spiritual care in the healthcare setting, spiritual care with regard to near-death experience, or the gerontology, or spiritual care in hospitals, in prisons, amongst children, and even in children with special need. And you have spiritual care in the setting of art therapy, okay? So artistic practice, creative practice. So correctional service, correctional centers, facilities. So okay, we have different concepts and diverse ideas on what is spiritual care, but it is a developing and emerging area of study, and somehow it is located between theology and psychology, or pathology, okay? Or so you have like the clinical pathology, treating illness from the physical what do you call the aspect, and you have theology, but somehow this is in between, not really into the medicine or the pathology or the the physiology, and not also into the tasawwuf and the higher spiritual discourse in Muslim literature. Yeah, so not even into that. So somehow in between. And the idea that the providers of Islamic spiritual care can be someone who we can say is in between, not really, achieving that high level of spiritual literacy as in the classical Muslim spiritual tradition, not going into being a sheikh or a murshid, okay, but not also a tabib or a doctor or a physician or the likes. So there is a suggestion, or there are many proposals on trying to professionalize spiritual care with the perception that these when the providers of Islamic spiritual care can be those who are in between. Okay, so I have published a report on this conference. If you want to know further and to read further on different ideas and concepts, and then what is the aim or the what do you call it, resolution, and also what we aspire in the future, we can go to this report published in our intellectual discourse, the Journal of Intellectual Discourse. Here is a conclusion. The conference concluded that the understanding of human ontology is crucial for an integrative model of Islamic spiritual care, and that this concept is undeniably multifaceted. So the understanding of who are we as insan, okay, the ontology. So I think the first session I have spoken on insan. Our first session was on insan and perhaps the nature of insan or the role of insan. The conference has also proposed for the establishment of a research center for Islamic spiritual care. Okay, so we have to bear in mind, trying to professionalize it, but this center is not as a center to study Sufism or Tasawwuf or a higher level or what we call as spirituality in general. Okay, so the paper, the proposal is being prepared in Netherlands, and perhaps in this year or next year we can see the establishment of this research center, perhaps in the future with the journals and more research into this subject. There was also an enthusiastic support to explore more avenues for exchanges between Islamic spiritual care and the global engagement with spirituality, including multi-faith spiritual care and spiritual care across traditions, and what are the sensitivities, what are the things, what are the boundaries. All of these need to be discussed and to be elaborated further. Now, 5, ri'ayah for spirituality and spiritual care. We have learned the topic or the term ri'ayah, and we have seen the distinction between spirituality and spiritual care. How do we apply ri'ayah in these two areas? So as we have seen before, ri'ayah is connected to the notion of shepherdhood. Okay? And why I chose to speak of a ri'ayah, because when we speak of spirituality and I trace the development of literature in spirituality, this is one of the first treatises on spirituality in Islam. That is the work by Al-Muhasibi, and he titled it Ri'ayah li Huquqillah. And as you can see here, I provided the work by Gavin Picken. He did this is his PhD in SOAS, University of London, that he studied the works of Al-Haris Al-Muhasibi. So if one really wants to dig further into the concepts and the ideas of Al-Haris Al-Muhasibi and perhaps the controversies, we know that there is a conflict between Al-Muhasibi and Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and all the early controversies concerning Zuhud and Tasawwuf, whether they are similar or they are two different things. Yeah, so you can consult this book by Gavin Picken, and here there is a chapter that he spoke on the difference between asceticism, zuhud, and mysticism, okay, which is somehow tasawwuf is connected to mysticism, but not necessarily. And we know all the different positions concerning tasawwuf. But the most importantly, that this is one of the early treatise, and it mentions the word ri'ayah, although he didn't develop this term into concept, into with a framework or something, but I think it is very important, and there is a significant idea or significant underlying why he chose the term ri'ayah for his book. And also there are many other books. I couldn't bring all of them here, but now we can see ri'ayah is connected to spirituality. And when we go further to compare pastoral care and ri'ayah, we find etymology, and also I call it the semantic symposium. The semantic symposium, where in English you find the notion or the word pasture and pastor. They are related to shepherdhood, even in the church Latin as well, Latin developed by the church, or as used by the church, spiritual guide, shepherd of souls, a Christian minister. If you go further to Proto-Indo-European root and you look back at how it develops, you find many of the words are related to this. Even the word care is related to the word pasture and pastor and connected connected terms. There are terms like presbyter, bishop, and so on and so forth. They are all somehow reflect this. They all reflect notions such as territory, the area or the community where the pastor will act, the flock of the sheep, care, souls, etc., which as a whole exemplifies the biblical metaphor of shepherding. It's very important. And if we go for Judaism, you find in Jeremiah or in Yirmiyahu the use of ro'i, and also it indicates shepherds and taking care. Okay. And interestingly, the word ra'iyah is also used in Arabic, ri'ayah. So somehow this Abrahamic literature, they all share the notion of shepherding or shepherdhood, and it relates to ri'ayah, and the ri'ayah also relates to spirituality. To compare ri'ayah with khilafah, when we say that every one of you is a ra'i, is a shepherd, is a guardian. Okay, when we compare it with khilafah, because we used to learn that every one of us is Khalifah. But in the Quran, Khalifah is mentioned 2 times, specifically referring to the prophets, not to all humanity, Adam and also Daud. And in the plural form, Khulafa is used 2 times, to mention 2 times, specific and 1 time general. And another plural form of Khalifa, that is Khalaif, 3 times general and 1 time specific. So I said the Quranic exegesis understand both Khulafa and Khalaif as merely referring to the next generations or inheritors, and in a sense, a replacement of a previous one. So there is no interpretation of Khalifa as ruler or as guardian or as the one who takes care or as a manager, but most of the times Khalifa, Khulafa or Khalaif are connected to replacement or next generation or inheritors. But the historical context that has informed or infused the word Khalifa with its political connotation. So in a sense, we can say that the word Ra'i and Ra'ayah are far more clear in terms of assigning the role of managing, taking care, administering to insan compared to the word Khalifah, which is, for me personally, this is somehow connects us to spirituality rather than the current use of Khalifah that connects us to the political connotation and the political manifestation or exemplification of that term. Okay. Some considerations when we speak of ri'ayah, or the ri'ayah as Islamic spiritual care, when we want to say that, oh, there is a need to professionalize. So we have to consider spirituality and to say that spirituality is always important. It's always at the first level. It's always the aim, without reducing ourselves to only spiritual care. So there are, three considerations that I think that these three are very important. First, spirituality indicates progression, because we always try to progress in spirituality. We want to enhance spirituality. So let not the professionalization of spirituality hinders or obstructs this progression. So sometimes when you professionalize something, it becomes a routine, or it becomes, you are used to it to the extent that you just follow it or takes it as a profession rather than an act of or an exercise of progression for your own life, personal life. Okay, so we have to consider this. Second, standardization versus aggrandization, because the aim or the purpose of life is to always aggrandize, or to look for the vastness of the wisdom, the majesty, and the magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to always look for more and more and more. Be a shakur, a servant who is shakur. Shakur means requesting for ziyadah, requesting for additions, or for increase, or for more and more. And we have to be careful with standardization that goes against looking for more. Because sometimes when you standardize something, so you stop at that level, and it becomes status quo that is very difficult to challenge, and sometimes it hinders creativity, it obstructs dynamism, and it doesn't lead to the witnessing of the grandeur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So people are doomed to follow certain standards or measures. This is very important to bear in mind. And third consideration, that is between vulnerability, because spiritual care is concerned with vulnerable cases. You just provide spiritual care when there are cases of mental illness, or like in healthcare setting. But for spirituality, it is more concerned with to sustain your own spirituality. It does not necessarily require the context of crisis or illness. So for spirituality, for us, even a Muslim philosopher will require spirituality. We will have to sustain spirituality. But for spiritual care, it is often connected to the conditions of illness or vulnerable conditions. Okay. So all this we need to consider, so that the professionalization will not bring us to an unintended aim or unintended destination. So that is for ri'ayah as spiritual care. Now, nasihah for spirituality and spiritual care, that we said earlier, nasihah is about unifying, bringing, integrating, filtering, and so on and so forth. So nasihah for me is the essence of tawheed. You have to first recognize Allah and know where to bring the second thing or the other. When you say bringing or integrating what is the destination, what is the aim. So we have to know that nasiha is the acts of the anbiya, the awliya, and the atqiya, the prophets, the saints, and the righteous. That the mission of the prophets, when they assume the role of messengers, is identified as exemplifying nasiha, as indicated repeatedly in Surah Al-A'raf. Nasiha is the essence of religion and the raison d'etre of Islam. Both ri'ayah and nasiha stem from the love for what is deemed valuable and the desire to elevate it to a better position. Therefore, every individual needs spiritual care and must provide spiritual care, as Islamic spirituality mirrors the care of Ar-Rahman for his creation, and spirituality cannot be achieved without the love for others. In the hadith, you will not enter paradise until you love one another, and you cannot until you become a mu'min. You will not enter paradise until you become a believer, and you will not become a believer until you love one another. So there is this constant need and providence of spiritual care for us. Nasiha as the philosophy of Islamic spiritual care. Both hadiths on ri'ayah and nasiha indicate engagement with various sites and situations. We can see kullukum ra'in, the hadith mentioned that the person is a ra'i, the woman is a ra'i, the servant is a ra'i. Okay, so it somehow indicates that there are different contexts of ri'ayah. So everyone is a ri'ayah in a certain context. Okay, it's not necessarily the scholars are the only ra'un, or those who are well-versed or well-trained in the subject. No, everyone of us is a ra'i. So somehow we have to learn the science or the knowledge of ri'ayah. And also nasiha, when you look at the hadith nasiha, it mentions nasiha for Allah, nasiha for kitab, nasiha for messengers, nasiha for the rulers, the managers of the affairs, nasiha for the common. So we have different levels of nasiha and grades and ranks. So the competencies and also the contents of nasiha and ri'ayah should be of different levels, different grades, different degrees. Okay? So there are different levels of knowledge. Finally, the ri'ayah and nasiha competencies and contents, we can only understand this if we grasp or we apprehend the Rahmah cosmology. What is meant by Rahmah cosmology? Okay. That the whole universe, okay, or maybe I can say, I've mentioned it, mentioned this in my paper. Also, before I forget, what I presented here with regard to ri'ayah and nasiha, part of the presentation, nasiha, is taken from the proceeding, and part of the presentation that connects or relates to ri'ayah is taken from my forthcoming publication, the forthcoming chapter on pastoral care in Islam. So when you see some of the quotes are taken from that paper, and it is being edited now by an institution in the UK. So perhaps they will publish it this year or next year. Okay. So Rahmah cosmology, I said in the paper that when you look at the physical realm, the current scientific paradigm is that gravity is the connecting force for everything in the physical realm. Although gravity is the weakest force compared to other forces, but gravity is like everywhere. It's like the connecting force to all in the physical realm. So Rahmah to the spiritual realm is as gravity to the physical realm. So one cannot understand spirituality unless one have to first learn what is Rahmah and the cosmology of Rahmah. That behind everything, there is Rahmah. Every single thing, the spirituality of every single thing necessitates the existence of Rahmah in it, including from the Muslim understanding, including the Rahmah in the existence of the non-believers. There are rahmah in the physical body of the non-believers. Okay? Although they may have not understood or not perceived the real rahmah or the greater rahmah when they reject Prophet Muhammad, because he was the one who was sent as the rahmah for the whole universe, that he makes it manifest. Without the Prophet, we will not know that the universe consists of rahmah. So he is the rahmah to the whole universe, to all the worlds. You can see, for instance, the Prophet mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he created the creation, the rahmah was, he created rahmah in 100 parts. This hadith in Sahih Muslim. Allah created rahmah in 100 parts, and he kept with himself 99 parts, and he sent down only one part. Because of this one part of rahmah, you see all the instances of mercy and compassion in the universe, including the wild animals will take care of its children, its offspring. You see a bear loving its offspring. You see the tiger will not step on its children. So this is why, because of that one part of rahmah. So the mu'min or the Muslims, they will see the other 99 parts in the hereafter. Or Allah will bring back and combine one part with the rest of the 99 parts. So because of this one part of rahmah, we can see all instances of compassion, mercy, love in this universe. So that is what I call as the cosmology of rahmah. So one cannot see this except one understands what is spirituality in Islam. So there are dimensions that one needs to go and to further study, that is to understand rahmah and ri'ayah, to be a good shepherd in this universe. We know that the direction is to recognize Ar-Rahman, to know God, to know Allah as Ar-Rahman. Okay. For providers of Islamic spiritual care, you know, they do not need to go into like the particulars of theology, because that will drag them into all the conflicts, like the conflicts between sects and, you know, the Mu'tazila, Ash'ariyah, Shia, and many, and so on and so forth. And it would be very challenging to understand and master this subject. So for providers of Islamic spiritual care, that we say that they should be somewhere in between, so they can try to understand or to learn Allah as Ar-Rahman, to see his acts of mercy in the creation, in the creatures, okay? and what we call as the theology of care. Okay? So not the theology as per se that is learned in the Department of Theology or faculties of theology. Second, to understand Al-Insan, as we have said earlier, the ontology of Insan is very important to understand spirituality and spiritual care. So we have to know, you know, all the views, at least the major views concerning the nature of Insan or the ontology of Insan, whether you are your body or you are your mind or you are your ruh. Okay, so I've spoken on this in the previous session. And the third one is to understand the Akwan or the universe. In other words, the usual what do you call it, not Trinity, the usual triad of God, nature, and human. But this is also learned and observed from, I put here, Surah Ar-Rahman. Okay, you have Ar-Rahman, then you have Al-Insan, and you have the mention of sun, moon, stars, trees, earth. They're all represented by Akwan or the universe. So the division is there in the surah. And also from the hadith that reads, be cognizant of Allah wherever you are, follow an evil conduct with a good one to wipe it out, and treat the people with decent manners. The three phrases of this hadith correspond to a person's relationship with God, that's Ar-Rahman, his or her own self, that is inside, and the environment, represented by the treatment of others. So we have to also consider the relation between man and the surrounding and the environment, and the nature and the eco and the cosmos and the likes. Now, with regard to the theology of care, the basic advice is for one to contemplate and ponder on the names of on the divine names of Allah, and try to emulate the lesson from the divine names, or not just to do it as nasheed, 99 Asmaul Husna, not only for being a nasheed, but to contemplate on the meaning and how to emulate the attribute there. For instance, how to become forgiving, or to become compassion, the most compassion. As Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah said, He, Allah, is companionable and loves companionship, forbearing and loves forbearance, good and loves goodness and its doers, and just and loves justice. He loves to accept excuses and loves those who excuse others. Thus, He recompenses His servant inasmuch as these attributes are present or absent in him. So Allah loves something, you try to emulate that. Allah loves to forgive, you try to become the one who can forgive. Allah loves to give before being asked, you try to emulate that. The Sufis will have their own term to speak of this, but that will bring us to many controversies. But okay, we know for sure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recompenses the servant, as mentioned by Ibn Qayyim here, in as much as these attributes are present or absent in the servant. And finally, with regard to the Ma'rifatul Aqwan, I don't speak on Insan because I've spoken on it in the previous session. With regard to Ma'rifatul Aqwan, the basic advice is to always remember that God governs the man or the humankind through the world, and governs the world through the man. Okay. So if we want to understand ourselves, we will always need to understand the universe. And if we want to understand the universe, we will always need to understand ourselves. Because those who are working in the universe are human. And if you understand the nature of human, you know how to interact or how to deal with other human being. So you are the mirror for others, for the universe. They will do whatever that you manifest to the universe. If you manifest egoism, then there will be some others who will replicate that, who will do the same, who will emulate it and take it from you. If you manifest forgiveness, then there will be someone who will take and follow or emulate your conduct. So you are the mirror for them to act and to conduct and to behave. At the same time, when you look at something outside of yourself, you know that there is a part of it in you. So if you want to make it disappear from the outside, you have to remove it from your inside first. If you see arrogance outside, there is a bit of arrogance inside yourself. If you want the arrogance outside to be removed, you have to remove it from inside yourself first. So that is this mutual relationship between you and the universe. And I believe if we have all of this in mind while trying to professionalize, to work, to operationalize, to devise anything related to Islamic spiritual care, or even therapy, or even counseling or advice, if we have all this in mind, we can better work to a certain extent, something that will benefit us here, in, and in the hereafter. So thank you very much for listening, and sorry for any inconsistencies or any shortcomings.
Thank you, Dr. Khairul Husaini. To be honest, I must say I'm mind blown by this presentation. So far, we have been learning about soul, looking at from myopic perspective, like looking at soul as a spiritual identity. But today, I've managed to actually expanded my understanding of soul by looking it at a bigger perspective, that the soul exists not only as a spiritual identity, rather something larger than life itself, by looking at how it is related to God and also the universe. I think there's some questions from the participants. Any questions from the participants before? Okay, Izzati.
Yes, Assalamualaikum Dr. Husaini.
Waalaikumsalam.
I am Izzati. I am very much interested when you said about, particularly about spiritual care. Because to my understanding, spiritual care here is more on the professions, like pastoral care practice in the Western world. And I am also interested when you said about Islamic pastoral care. Then I believe that this is still in a baby step lah. But I just want to ask from your point of view, so because you stated when it comes to spiritual care, most of them is very much related to taking care of those who are having
Sorry,
illness or terminal illness. Yes.
Sorry. I think there was a lag in the connection, so I didn't get. And you said that you were interested in Islamic pastoral care.
Spiritual care from Islamic perspective lah.
Yeah. Okay.
So because I think this is parts of professions, and then you mentioned that when it comes to spiritual care, there are two parts. One is taking care of the people who have terminal illness. Another one is when it comes to spirituality only. So normal people can also increase our spirituality, right?
Yeah.
So my question is that if we were to do this, is there any different in terms of competency? Meaning that are there different training in terms of those who want to involve in spiritual care for terminal illness, as well as those who want to improve, just to improve, or taking care for the normal people just to increase their spirituality. So that is my first question with regards to competency. And another one is the basis of me asking this because in Malaysia we have lots of penunggang agama.
Lots of what?
Penunggang agama.
Okay.
So because of this, I would like to ask with regards to competency also, would you suggest that would there be any kind of regulations? I mean, like, who can be the pastoral care? Do they have to take any kind of what we call certification or
because like not everyone can become a murabbi.
Because you stated that they have to understand what is rahmah, riayah, the ontology of insan. So I just want to know your point of view with regards to this. Okay, thank you so much. So that is my.
Thank you, Sister Zati. All right.
Should I answer or wait for other question?
I think you can answer first.
Okay. What is azan?
Azan.
Oh, yeah. So maybe if anyone has a question, you can write. I can see if I can combine the answer in one reply.
If anyone have questions, feel free to write in the chat box. We can compile and Dr. Khairul will attempt to answer them. Thank you. I believe the azan is over.
Hmm.
Is it still azan at your side, Dr. Khairil?
Yeah, of course. How is it? I mean, in one, are you in campus?
Oh, currently no.
Okay, okay, okay. So, because you surprised me how it is over in your
Yes.
It's not
Near my
over.
neighborhood is over already.
Okay. Now, if let me remind myself. I mean, the first questions concerns the what was that? The
Competency.
competencies. Yeah, the competencies. I think, I mean, you can try to look at this paper by the Human and his friends. I mean, the title is the TIIP. The TIIP, the traditionally Islamically integrated psychotherapy, something like that. Yeah. I think it's a Human and Abdullah Rothman. So if you look at the paper, you will see how they adopted the framework of Al-Ghazali. So for Al-Ghazali, there's like the level of Sufi Sheikh, then the level of Rafiq, the level of peer. Okay, so they look at the advice of Al-Ghazali to the peers, and they re-express or re-interpreted the advices to the peers as competencies for Islam, the providers of Islamic spiritual care. So because there are advices for sheikh and advices for peers. So that for peers, this could be like proper or suitable for our current modern professionalization of Islamic spiritual care. And they mention and they have the table to propose competencies based on the framework and advices of Al-Ghazali for the peers. I don't know, maybe because the peers are known as Rafiq, or the word for in Arabic is Rafiq or Khalil. Perhaps that was the reason for the naming of the center as the Khalil Center. Or I'm not sure if there is another scholar named Khalil who established the center, but I guess that's the idea, because they mentioned in the paper on Rafiq / Khalil. So it was meant for the peer, but they transform it into competencies for providers of Islamic spiritual care. But of course, if you look at different approaches to spirituality, because we have many tariqas in spirituality, so of course there will be like different advisors, and if one adopted like the Ghazalian or the Akbarian or the maybe Naqshbandi or the modern Sufism, so you will have like different ideas of competencies. Okay? So that is given. I mean, you will find that. So we can't really avoid that due to the current situation, because we don't have boundaries, with the information, they open internet and everything. So if you Google or you search, you will definitely encounter like different ideas or schemes of competencies. But to my knowledge, as today, the academic and the most systematic expression or elaboration of competencies, you can look at the experience of Abdul Rahman, Humam, and those from Khalil Center. And you can just Google the TIIP or something like that, therapy or something, the traditionally Islamically integrated psychotherapy. So they also shared the same idea that it's somewhere in between, not really to like the higher Sufi level, and not also towards the medicine or pathology, how to treat those from that side.
So does that mean that there's a riayah for awam and riayah for specialized individual?
Yeah, that's they didn't mention riayah, but riayah, I said that this is actually part of the riayah. Then to learn the hadith, when the hadith spoke of different levels of riayah, it has already indicated that because we forget the hadith, so that we perhaps miss the idea that there are different levels of competencies and so on and so forth. Okay. So that is I think the first question. The second concern the regulation. Okay, that is why I mentioned in the presentation the considerations. First, what the standardization. Okay, we can have standards, we can have regulations. Okay, but we will always need to be open to discussion. So to say that the culture of scholarship, of learning, of seeking knowledge, of ijtihad must always be promoted, because otherwise, whatever mazhab, even it is a correct mazhab, if there's no promotion of ijtihad and so on and so forth, you will not be able to address the current situation, because it is part of the plan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made. Everything will go through changes in situations, in conditions. So that is why knowledge is with the ulama. It has to be with a living being who experience these situations. Otherwise, knowledge can be in the book, but knowledge, according to Muslims or Islam, knowledge is with the alim, with the ulama. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala snatch knowledge or take knowledge by the demise or the death of ulama, scholars. So how do we know who is the right one, who is the wrong one? This is the question that has been asked by everyone. in this life, you will be asking this question, and even if someone gives you an answer, that answer is from his perspective. So if I give you an answer here, how do you know? Then that you are following me. Okay, so we can say that there are common guidelines, and there are things which if you want to go further, you want to climb higher, then you will need to devote more efforts. So if want to climb higher in terms of closeness with Allah, then more efforts, on learning, seeking knowledge, on seeking the way to verify, or if it's not based on knowledge, then based on the amal, to couple the amal, increase the amal, or a better way, that is through the adab or the akhlaq. So that is why I mentioned in the theology of care to emulate the attributes that we learn, or lessons that we learn from the divine names. So because of the hadith that says, if you manage to contemplate and to practice emulate on 99 names, then you are already guaranteed paradise. But the names of Allah, of course, there are many more than 99s. Maybe we don't know, thousands or not. So okay, so the vastness, it is vast, but you only need 99. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr.
Yeah.
Khairil. There's another question from Dr. Jamila Hanum in the chat. She asks, I would like to know your opinion about the term care used in spiritual care. I personally view the word care is used as intervention approaches rather than preventive and maintaining approaches. For example, when we use the term, the word self-care, we use it not only to people who need extra care because they are having issues, but everyone are encouraged to do self-care in order to prevent problems. And when we have problems, we still use self-care as part of intervention process also.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know about your opinion on this.
Yeah, I think this, I have somehow indicated this in the consideration on, I think it's sustainability and vulnerability. Okay. So I said that spirituality does not necessarily means that you have to be in that conditions of conflict or crisis or illness, or as you mentioned here, what preventive or therapy or something like that. Yeah? So it's our understanding of self-care is that we always in need of progression. Okay, so we always ask to ziyadah, to Rabbi zidni ilma, increase us in witnessing, in seeing you, okay, until we arrive at seeing you in the paradise. So we are always in need of that. So our idea of care is a bit different, but I haven't gone through the etymology and the semantic and the practice of care in other religions, but I have said in many places that the problem of our time, in addition to the loss of adab mentioned by Sayyid Naqil Atas, is that our confusion of the notion of care. That includes the idea of relationship. So because of this not understanding care and the attitude of, maybe we can say, I don't careism. This attitude of I don't care, okay, has led to many things, problems in families between husband and wives, because of this attitude of I don't care. This is my wall. I don't care what is the consequence of my posting. I don't care what is the consequence of my acts. So there is the idea of selfish or individualism that I think that is the spirit of the postmodernism, the liquefaction of everything and individualism, that we lost our correct understanding of care or riayah. So I think the riayah should be brought back. So that is why I really focus on riayah, and I try to develop it. And first, I develop it in hadith criticism. Instead of stopping at riwayah and dirayah, I said the third phase is to riayah, is to practice the hadith and to experience when you practice the hadith. So that is the best verification of hadith. Other than, you verify it is sahih or da'if, and then what is the meaning, but later on you don't practice it. So you don't get the sweetness of practicing, the sweetness of that relationship. And Alhamdulillah, just recently, while I'm working on this, I found a quote by Ibn Qayyim who said that the concern of narrators is riwayah, transmission of facts. The concerns of scholars is dirayah, the understanding or the knowledge. And the concern of Arifin, the Gnostics, those who know Allah, is ri'ayah. They are very concerned with ri'ayah. That is to practice and to taste. So to learn to grasp knowledge from tasting it, not just from thinking of it or intellectualizing it, but to experience it. Because the experience can never brings doubt to yourself, whereas rational, philosophical may brings you doubt. And this is also based on my personal experience, engaging with many philosophies and when I was in the West. So I believe that you have to balance between all the three dimensions. I hope I have.
Does that answer the question, Dr. Jamila?
I've answered the question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hussaini and also Brother Muhajir. Yeah, if that's the case, spirituality and spiritual care, you did mention that we need to sustain our spirituality. So it is one concept. But I am when we heard about care here in today's presentation, it is very much something that we must do when we have issues. So you are suggesting that that may not be correct. Am I getting it correctly?
I think my suggestion is that there are different levels and different and several contexts. So we can't like really ask from providers of Islamic spiritual care to exercise care at the higher level. So the higher level of care will include sustainability, progression, witnessing the majesty, the magnificence of Allah. So that is the high level. So that will be the care given by the murshid or the murabbi, those person who are well versed and erudite in knowledge. So for what we are trying to do here is when we say professionalization, because now I'm trying to accommodate this notion of professionalization and measurable and quantifying. So that is why I began in my introduction with, cautions concerning these terms, because we don't want to be dragged into like, modernism and deviating from the aim. So when we try to accommodate, we may say that there are certain things that we can somehow plan or devise for providers of Islamic spiritual care, but as Doctor mentioned here, preventive intervention, I believe they are like scientific or explanation and more nuances to these terms. I may not I may not be familiar with these terms because I'm not from psychology, but that is the thing that I intended from the beginning, or even from the previous session. That is, we have exchanges so that I can see, how things are interpreted or devised or executed from different perspective or from various levels. It doesn't mean that the levels doesn't necessarily indicate a higher or lower, but the necessities and the plan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put it in place for everyone. So when we speak of higher or lower, it's only from the perspective of conversation, but we don't really know in Akhirat. I know someone appears like a murshid could be like lower in Akhirah compared to someone who doesn't appear like a murshid. Okay, so So what we are speaking on the terms that we can all be convenient with, but we know the realities would be something else in the hereafter. We just hope to achieve it as we understood it.
Thank you, Dr. Husaini. I agree that we need to frame our discussion. It's clearer to me now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jamila. We have one questions, actually not a questions, more like recommendations from Miratul Haya.
Yeah.
Are there books or references of recommendation to further understand the framework of the foundation of Riayah and comprehending and implementing Rahmah? Jazakallahu khairan.
I guess I'm not sure if there is a book that put it into the framework that I'm trying to portray it here, trying to express it here. But of course, scholars have been speaking on Rahmah, speaking on Riayah. But as far as I've been, to my knowledge until today, I haven't seen the explanation of the hadith of Riayah, hadith of Riayah, in the way that I understood it. The same with the hadith of Nasiha. For many of the past scholars, when they interpret Nasiha for Allah, they said it's the Nasiha for the sake of Allah, or to bring people to Allah. But I understood it as the Nasiha from Allah to Himself. In the similar way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, Kataba ala nafsihi rahmah. Harama zulma ala nafsihi in a hadith. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribed rahmah unto Himself. And He forbid zulm, injustice to Himself. So He did something to Himself. So for me, the nasiha is from Him to Himself. And then there is a nasiha for the implementation, manifestation of the realities mentioned in the book, Kitab, and the nasiha for the to manifest the messages of the messengers, and also at a higher level between the messengers themselves. And also there are nasiha for the maybe if we translate it literally, like the elites or the managers or the rulers, and the nasiha for the common folks. So the nasiha is of different levels, and I'm working on a commentary on that hadith and also the hadith of Riayah. So you can read like the works of the Sufis on the subject, but to have it in this framework that I think hopefully that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala agreed with this framework.
Inshallah.
I think I haven't encountered any of the previous work. I know, but it could be because I'm not like I have not exhausted all the references or the works of the early Muslims. Just as like when we say that there are riwayah, dirayah, and riayah, I thought that I introduced the third phase, but suddenly I encountered Ibn Qayyim mentioned quite the same, but although not as broad as I elaborated it. But somehow the idea was there. So, perhaps some of the ideas were already there in the books of scholars. But this is my humble attempt.
Thank you, Dr. Khairil. I think we are reaching towards the end of our program. I just want to... Oh, there's a question from Miratul Haya. Or is that just a...
No, it's not a question. Just thank you very much, to Dr.
Just a thankful gesture. All right.
May Allah is Doctor's research. Yeah, that is.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Miratul. I just want to confirm my takes from this program that Riayah and Nasiha is not really a form of treatment, rather it is a form of care. Meaning that it is not only when people are sick or suffering from spiritual struggle, perhaps, and these concepts is applicable to everyone. Do they need to actually subscribe to the triad of like Ma'rifah Ar-Rahman, Al-Insan, Al-Aqwan, or actually these three actually serve the foundation for the practice of riayah and nasiha? Sorry.
Yeah, these three serves as the foundation. Yeah.
Okay.
But
I think-
when we say as riayah and nasiha, they can be, they are of different levels to such an extent that we can also apply them for the professional form of spiritual care, because we differentiate between spirituality and spiritual care. So we say that the spiritual care is a professional form of enhancing spirituality or treating people with illness or so on and so forth. So because the broad concept of riayah and nasiha, they can be implemented for a higher level and for a professional form of care or spiritual care. So
Thank you, Dr. Khairul.
so I think this is to say that it's not to say that spiritual care is necessarily wrong or necessarily too modern or too professionalized. No, we can accommodate that.
Yeah.
We will try to develop that, try to accommodate that, try to work and plan on that. But to say we already have the basis. So it's a very good and dynamic, and I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a good start.
I didn't manage to bring all the statements of the scholars. Otherwise, you'll see that it's a big something that is very big. Yeah, riayah and nasiha.
Okay, I think that's it for today. Just that I want you to share maybe some advices for us here, psychologists looking into the studying of the mental processes, human external behavior. Maybe there are some aspects that we are currently lacking in order to understand men, right? From the perspective, even on the ontological perspective of men, which include spirituality. So maybe you can share some advices with us on that.
I think this is maybe like I think that it's not for me to advise my colleagues professors here, but yeah, that maybe we can consider our to further or deepen our understanding on what is really ilm, what is really amal, and what is really akhlaq. Because it's not just a matter of intellectual pursuit, but most of these, or we call it all of these, are real. It connects to our experience with God, and the experience with God is not the mental state of some mental concept. It's something that you can experience it in your life. It's the relationship with God. So I think by deepening our understanding in what is ayn, and not and amal and akhlaq, and not only subscribing to the status quo or the standard definition or the standard understanding, and not afraid of listening and exploring, whilst limiting yourself to yourself. I think that even though it may bring some questions, but eventually it will arrive at
Inshallah.
tasting it, inshallah.
Thank you. I think we have finally reached the end of our program. It's near 5 p.m. already. Thank you so much, Dr. Khairul Hussaini and Dr. Jus, who cannot be with us today, and Dr. Hafiza and the rest of the lecturers, colleagues and friends that are with us today. And with that, I believe this session has been very fruitful and helpful to our journey, not only for academic pursuit, as mentioned by Dr. Hussain, but also as our own pursuit for putting an effort into improving our relationship with Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala. Because at the end of the day, that is the ultimate goal, even not only in this life, but also for our next life, insyaAllah. Okay, and with that, I will end this program with Tasbih Kifarah and Surah Al-As. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Dr. Khairul Husaini. Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.